Q&A at the end, so there will be plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to start the recording now and turn it over to Marg.
Well, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Just a thumbs up that you can all hear me. Excellent. This is the new way of Zoom, right? We clap like this. We give a thumbs up like this. It's how we're living these days. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, as are your loved ones during this crazy time, and that you're still singing with joy amidst it. So I'm going to attempt sharing my screen here. One moment. All right, let's try that again. How about now? Excellent. All right. So, welcome everybody. My name is Mark Wilkinson. People affectionately call me Dr. Mark, and you can too, or you can just call me Mark, whichever works for you. I'm here tonight having collaborated with the CCC now for 11 years. I can't believe that Marg and I have been working together that long. We first knew each other many years ago, and we've been having happy collaborations since. So I'm very grateful to Marg to having me here tonight, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you. So as you'll see, this is called Voice Science and Hygiene 101. Now, I have this belief that choirs, community, professional, or otherwise, all have the ability and right to know what is going on with their voice when they make sound. I do not think that the voice should be a mystery. I don't think that the voice should be reserved only for the big pros that you know of that are famous. If you use your voice and you use it with joy, you are worthy of knowing how it works and knowing what you can do to keep it healthy and happy for a lifetime of singing. So, with that in mind, I am not here to turn you into opera singers. That is not my goal tonight. I am not here to tell you that you don't know how to sing. I know you know how to sing, that's why you're in a choir. And so with that in mind, this is a shame-free zone. Everything that I share with you tonight is just that. It is something that I want to share with you. I hope to provide you with some interesting tips, tricks, and yes, we'll bust a few myths tonight that are common to the voice. And I hope that you get something out of it. I hope that you learn something new that you never thought you'd learn about the voice. And that when you take this idea or these ideas, whichever it is, to your next rehearsal, be it with this choir, singing in the shower, singing with family, wherever you might sing next, I hope that you will find a renewed sense of passion, joy, and yes, knowledge of your voice. Another thing that I like to mention is that, yes, I technically have the title of doctor, but I am not a physician. So I am not here to diagnose anything. I am not here to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't be doing with their bodies, voices, minds, hearts. I am here to give you some thoughts, some ideas, but please do not take this as complete medical advice. I do have a background in the medicine of the voice, but I just like to say that I am not a physician. So take everything with a grain of salt. So I always like to start by reminding people that you are not your voice. Well, okay, maybe you are your voice a little bit. So there's this idea that what we sound like determines who we are. I don't necessarily believe that that's true all the time. Yes, the way we sound does reveal a lot about how we feel, but we get very, very judgmental of ourselves. Oh, I'm not that good of a singer. Oh, I don't have perfect pitch, right? We start to get very, very attached to our voices. Now, our voices are, of course, a part of who we are, but they are not everything that who we are. So I wanted to begin today by reminding you that at the end of the day, you are not just this thing that we call the larynx. You have a heart, you have a mind, you have a family, you have friends, you have your own life that you lead. Yes, we have to carry this thing called the voice around and we use it all the time. But let's make sure that when we learn about the voice, we're doing it in a way that actually serves us as people, first and foremost, so that we as people can feel empowered and joyful in using the voice when and if we use it. So with that in mind, some of the things that I'm going to talk to you today about are, what is the voice? What does that mean? What does it look like? When does speech end and when does singing begin? What's the difference? I think we know sort of intellectually or intuitively, but maybe we don't actually know the difference. What does the larynx look like? It's something we use all the time, right? A flautist gets to see their flute, a clarinetist gets to see their clarinet, and etc. But we never really get to see our voice. It is the invisible instrument. It is one of the only instruments that we cannot see. Why does my voice sound like that? People are often curious, I sound a little nasal today. Why is that? We're going to talk about that. Are you really a singer? Spoiler alert, yes, you are. But we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. As I sort of mentioned earlier, there's this idea of the disembodied voice. We start to separate the voice from who we are. I want to put the voice back in to our entire selves tonight as I speak with you. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to bust a few myths that I often hear in voice lessons and in choir rehearsals, and I hope that you'll find them as entertaining as I do. And then, of course, we're going to talk about why your feelings and your health are really, really important to taking care of your voice. Because ultimately, if you get nothing else from this presentation, I hope that you will feel that you have a greater sense of ownership over your voice and how it works. So I'm not here to scare anyone about the voice. I'm not here to turn anyone neurotic and have you think that you're doing all of the wrong things. This isn't about what not to do. This is what I hope you will do. I hope this is what you will add to your repertoire as people who sing all the time. So this is the first thing I want you to see. This is what your larynx looks like. Now, this is your larynx without any of the muscles involved. So this is really just the cartilages and membranes that make up the larynx. Now, can you see this cursor that I'm moving? Perfect, thank you. So just to give you an idea of what we're looking at right now, where I'm circling right here is what you all might know as the Adam's apple. So that's what we're looking at here. So this is looking at the front of your voice box. That's one of the things that we often call the larynx, is the voice box. Now, this is called an Adam's apple, of course. It's more prominent on males, generally speaking, but all people have them. They just happen to be more pronounced. You can see that I have one here that's easy to find. Now, what's really interesting about the Adam's apple is that's actually where the vocal cords themselves start. So if you want to know where your vocal cords are, just find that little notch. It's often called the laryngeal prominence, as you'll see here. It's often called the thyroid cartilage notch as well. Now, as you can imagine, if you look over to this one, this is actually from behind. So this is if you're behind me looking into the larynx. And then this one over here is a side view. So as you can see, the larynx is mostly made up of cartilage. There is one bone that it attaches to, which is the hyoid bone, right here at the top. But the rest is really just cartilage. And there's some ligaments as well, there's some membranes. But the basic structure is all cartilage. Now, what's interesting about that is as we age, as you may know, cartilage starts to turn into bone. It starts to ossify. So that's one of the reasons that your voice changes as you age. There are some other things that happen with the actual vocal cords themselves, but a lot of the time you'll hear about people who can't sing certain repertoire until they're older. It's because that heavier repertoire, think sort of Verdi, Mahler, that really big honkin' singing as we call it, often people wait until they're 40 and older to really specialize in that repertoire because it actually comes with a little bit of strength from bone instead of cartilage. So it's something to consider when we think about young voices versus older voices. Your cartilage literally starts to ossify. It's a kind of fascinating thing for me. Now, I am not here to test you, by the way. You do not have to memorize every single one of these. And what's great is this will be on YouTube for you. So hopefully if you ever want to think, oh, what was that one cartilage called? You can come back. But basically, I'll give a quick overview here. This is your epiglottis. So I want you to imagine that your tongue is here, right? Remember that if this is my Adam's apple right here, I want you to imagine that behind it is the esophagus. So we swallow here, and we breathe here. So this is actually our trachea. This is our airway. So as you know, we have to exhale when we sing. So the air comes through the trachea, and then here's the vocal cords. You'll often hear the vocal cords referred to as the vocal folds. They are technically, from a scientific standpoint, called the vocal folds just because of the way that they work. You'll see some other views in a moment, but I'm just giving you a sense of what happens. The epiglottis, of course, is the thing that actually folds back when we eat, right? So what that does is it actually folds back. Oh, where's my cursor? There it is. It folds back to cover the airway so that food goes down this way and not this way. Have you ever had that feeling of, oh, went down the wrong way and you start coughing? That's because the swallow that took place didn't quite feel like it covered the airway, so you felt like you were about to aspirate your food. So we want this food going down behind it, down the esophagus. So that's just an idea of overall of the structure. You'll have a few more pictures to come. So that's what we're working with tonight. Oops. Now, before we move on, let's talk about what the larynx actually does. What is its purpose? The first one, as you can imagine, is for air. It is actually the midway point between the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. Now, you'll read there that I mentioned that it regulates airflow in and out of the lower respiratory tract. Isn't it amazing when we talk? We never really think about breathing. Have you ever noticed that? We just talk. And somehow we know exactly how much air we need to talk. It's this intuitive thing. That has a lot to do with the larynx. The larynx is really, really good at helping regulate how much air is required to make sound. And yet, for some reason, when we go to sing, we're holding our folder and we go, and we take these big, huge breaths. But it's actually quite amazing if you just allow your body to open. All of a sudden, you'll notice there's air coming in and out. So I actually encourage all of you watching tonight to just go ahead and do that. I want you to see if you can just open your throat and let air fall in. We have this thing in choir where we think we have to take this big breath because we feel like we're doing something that way. We feel like we're really singing. But isn't it amazing if you just sit in your chair? Oh, there's the air coming in and out. Now, if the vocal folds or the vocal cords cover the airway, if the vocal folds are closed, you're not going to be able to breathe. So I want you to imagine that when you open your throat, you're actually opening your voice. Right? So we know we can't sing on an inhale. That would be really hard. It would be very hard to try to sing as we're inhaling because the cords have to be open for us to breathe. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the second thing that it does is it protects the airway. It actually serves to make sure that anything that's unwanted doesn't get in. So of course, that epiglottis covers when we swallow, as do the cords. They close as the epiglottis folds back so that food goes down the back of our throat into the esophagus and not down our trachea. Of course, the larynx is where we make sound. From the primalist sound of any kind of sound that we make comes from right here. Of course, it adds some meaning through pitch, through contour. It helps us communicate how we're feeling by the kind of sound that we make, whether it's loud, whether it's soft, whether it's bright, whether it's dark, whether it's sad, whether it's happy. The range of colors is amazing. As I sort of hinted to earlier as well, it also tells us how we feel. You ever talk to someone and, yeah, I'm okay. It's all right. It's kind of a rough day. It's amazing what we can actually reveal about what's going on with our overall health, both physically and mentally, just in the way that we speak. You might find it very interesting to listen to people after tonight's chat. You can start to really learn a lot about people by the way they sound, by the way they talk, what they're communicating through the way that they enunciate their words. It's really, really interesting to pay attention to. And then, of course, we sort of talked about this earlier, but it also provides this beautiful valving system for things not going in and, of course, things not going out. So we have one thing called a cough, right? We cough if something gets caught in our throat because we don't want it to go in to the lungs. So we cough it out. And then, of course, we also have this thing that we call the Valsalva response. Have you ever, I've got a desk here, have you ever tried to lift something heavy and you go, imagine lifting a piano. You'll hear a little bit of action from the larynx. What that does is the vocal cords are actually closing to preserve air. Have you ever gotten that lightheaded feeling? It's because air's not getting to your head because your throat's closed. That's the Valsalva response. You'll often see that at the gym. Pay attention to the guys who lift a lot of weights at the gym. You'll see a lot of tension in their neck because they're trying to keep all of their air below their voice box. So they, and that's why there's often a sound that comes out of it, because it's sort of that grunting sound. So what's amazing to me is the larynx does all of these things, yet we never get to see it. It's the invisible instrument that actually has so much to do with what we do on a daily basis in our lives, which is why one of my main goals with my work that I do is to teach people that how we take care of this often tells us how we take care of our whole selves. It's a really beautiful, beautiful organ made up of so many different things. So you may have heard of the book called Gray's Anatomy. Well, this is from that. These are pictures of the larynx now with muscles. Again, there will be no exam. There will be no test, I promise. But this was just a sense of what this looks like. So let's start from the outside, okay? So this is a picture of your neck, shoulders, and your clavicle here. And these are all of the muscles that we call the extrinsic muscles of the larynx. So those are the ones on the outside of your larynx. Because what's really cool about the larynx is it's actually just suspended. It's not very well attached to anything. It's kind of just hanging out because the muscles are all there. So what we do with our neck has a lot to do with what we do with our larynx. You maybe have heard a conductor or a singing teacher talk to you about relaxing your neck. Well, the idea is that if the larynx is suspended there by muscles and all of the muscles of our neck are really, really tight, well, then our larynx is going to be really, really tight as well. So that's what they mean when they say that. So this might be a little bit small on your screen, so don't worry. But you'll see a muscle here. You'll see a muscle here. And then you'll see a muscle here. Of course, they have their pairs, right? They have on each side. These are the muscles that actually lower the larynx. So I want you to watch my Adam's apple. If I take a nice big breath in, watch my larynx go down. I'll do that one more time. Watch here. So we have muscles that actually lower our larynx. It's one of the reasons that we can yawn. Now, all these muscles up here, you've got a whole bunch of them. You've got your mylohyoid, your digastric muscle. Don't worry, there's no quiz. These are the ones that actually lift your larynx. Now, why would we want to lift our larynx? Well, now I'm going to do something that's going to lift my larynx. I'm going to take a swallow. Now watch my Adam's apple. See how it went up? Part of that protection of the airway, part of that swallowing is because our larynx can go up. Now, I want you to imagine singing as you swallow. It kind of feels a little bit tight, right? It would be kind of hard to do. So the reason that we want to lower the larynx, the reason that we are grateful that we have muscles that lower the larynx, is if you actually get the larynx down a little bit, it doesn't have to be forced down, but if you actually open the throat, all of a sudden there's all of this room for resonance because we've actually allowed the larynx to open the throat. People talk about opening the throat, but what does that actually mean? If nothing moves, the throat's not going to open. So we don't just have the throat to open this way and this way, we also have the throat to open this way. I am sure you have seen a choral conductor do this, right? There's that gesture they do where they're doing this. That's actually a beautiful gesture to remind you, oh, right, there's space downward too. So by the way, if you do this at home right now, I can't see all of you, but some of you might start to yawn when you do this. As soon as we start to do that, it often brings in a lot of air into our body. So we go, oh, wow, look at all that space. Yeah, there's some yawning. I can see a couple of you, perfect. Now, of course, we can't sing while yawning, but people often talk about how really easy open singing is almost like the beginning of a yawn. And that's what they mean. It's because when we yawn, our larynx lowers a lot. Now over here, this is just a side view. Again, whoops, my bad. This is my Adam's apple again. This is the thyroid cartilage, just to give you a sense of where we're at. And then this view here is from above. So this is as if you were looking sort of through the top of my head. And again, this is the notch. This is the Adam's apple as we know it. Here's the beginning of the vocal folds, and here's where they end. And then as you can imagine, they come together when we make sound. So again, don't worry about memorizing all of these muscles. I just wanted to give you a sense of what it looks like, the invisible instrument. Now, let's look at these vocal folds again. Now, we know a few things about the vocal cords or the vocal folds, whichever you want to call them. And this is a slightly, how would I say, simplified version of it, because I don't want this to be too confusing. But I just want you to get a sense of what it looks like when the cords are open versus when the cords are closed. So this would be for inspiration, right? This is when we want to take air in, and this is when we're making sound. So we go from to that's what's happening. The throat is actually now closed by the vocal folds. Now you'll see that we have these things called false vocal folds. These are these big things here that you might know famously as what we call the Batman voice, that very famous "I'm Batman," that very sort of dark, rough sound. Those are the false vocal folds participating. So what we don't want is we don't want a rough sound. We want a nice clear sound with the actual vocal folds rather than That's not the sound we're going for. So if you've ever wondered where that voice comes from, that's literally where it's coming from, the false vocal folds, and that's one of their technical terms. Again, just to reorient you here, here's the epiglottis that would come back to cover for the swallow, and here's the tongue. So there's your voice. By the way, there's your trachea. Those are the cartilages of your trachea. So we have the sound source, which of course is the vocal folds. Now we have to filter the sound. So we have these wonderful things above the vocal folds that make sound. It's this entire space here. We tend to call it the pharynx. Now, the pharynx is where the sound is created here, right down at the vocal folds, and it comes up and it resonates. You'll hear people talk about resonance. Well, what does resonate mean? What does resonance actually mean? Where does that happen? It happens in the vocal tract. The vocal tract is defined as the distance from the larynx, or the vocal folds, to your lips. So all through here is where the sound actually filters and turns into what we hear as maybe a dark sound, a bright sound, a warm sound, a nasal sound. We have all of these things available to us. Now, we sometimes even resonate in our nose. Of course, here in Ottawa, we have examples of that all the time. In French, we resonate in our nose every 10 seconds. Anytime you hear a vowel, like the one in the word bonjour, that first sound, bon, that's because my soft palate, there it is lowered, so I can make a nasal sound. So if I go from a nasal to a pure O, the difference is that when I say O, my soft palate has lifted to cover my nose. So I want you to try that at home. I want you to say and I want you to feel that your palate is down, and then I want you to say O, O, O. Now, as we perceive beautiful singing in choir, we don't normally consider that an entire phrase sung with a nasal sound to be particularly beautiful, right? That's not necessarily the sound that we're going for. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about one of those myths which has to do with your soft palate. So this will follow with that. But the idea being is that we want to have nice, pure vowels. So if I sing E, A, A, O, U, I can make all of those nasal. E, A, A, O, U, by just choosing a nasal sound. The only difference is that my soft palate is dropped. You'll see why it's funny when I get to one of the myths later. But that is actually where your sound resonates. So what you choose to do with your voice doesn't have as much to do with this as we think it does. This is the source of the sound, but this is the filter. All of this yummy resonance is how I can make a really bright sound, ah, 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 or I can make a really dark sound, oh, oh, oh. I'm just using different parts of the vocal tract. I'm highlighting different resonances based on the sound that I want to find. And that's where that happens. By the way, I love this diagram because, you know, we talk in winter about having a sinus infection. Have you ever seen your sinuses before? Because this is what they look like. So these are the major sinuses that we have to work with: the frontal, the ethmoid, and the maxillary. Now it's these ones, these maxillary ones, that we hate the most when we're sick. This is the one that feels the worst when we feel all congested. That's what's happening, is that's all filled with stuff that we don't want to be in there. But what's interesting is our sinuses can be a very, very lovely source of resonance as well. If I think about directing my sound to the front of my face into what we call that sort of sinus resonance, all of a sudden I've got a very bright sound that can carry quite well into a room. So as you're all on mute, do it as you need to. No one's judging, no one's listening. I want you to just practice. So think about putting the sound here, and then I want you to put the sound in the most Bing Crosby-esque sound you've ever made in your life. Oh, and all of a sudden we're using that yummy warm resonance at the back. That's because, of course, the sinuses, this is hard, right? This stuff is something that can bounce sound off of. Whereas, my cursor here, back here, that's all tissue. That's all nice, malleable, pliable stuff that we can, actually kind of open up into a nice dark sound. So that's what your actual resonating cavity looks like, right? We all talk about resonance. What does that actually mean? Well, resonance is just a vibration hitting off of a surface, right? We need a surface for the sound to bounce off of. So once we have the sound, it filters and resonates up here through the vocal tract. Now, as I hinted to a moment ago, we're going to talk about some myths tonight. I said at the beginning that this is a shame-free zone. It's hard to bust myths and not sound completely 100% shame-free. So just bear with me, go with me here. I want to hopefully bring a smile to your face if you've ever heard some of these myths. And maybe you'll go, you know, that never made sense to me before. And now I understand it a little bit more. So let's start with number one. You've all heard this, sing from your diaphragm. Who's heard this before? Sing from your diaphragm. Yes, thank you. So this is one of the biggest myths that we who work in the voice meet all the time. We meet this myth quite often. I absolutely love this picture. I hope you can all see this picture. This is a really interesting 3D image of what your diaphragm actually looks like. So we've got your lungs here, right? The left one's just a tiny bit smaller to make a little bit of room for the heart. And this is your diaphragm. Now, how many of you have been told, put your hand on your diaphragm and let's go shh, 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 shh. Based on what you're seeing, is this really my diaphragm? No, this is actually my stomach. These are my guts. Your diaphragm is actually a lot higher than people think it is. It's right underneath your lungs. And I also want you to notice how there's actually very little diaphragmatic muscle here at the front. It actually wraps around, oh, I did it again. It actually wraps around back. And then I want you to take a look at this diagram here. When we inhale, the diaphragm actually flattens. The diaphragm doesn't come forward into your belly button. It actually flattens. Now, when it flattens, yes, your guts move out of the way. So that belly breathing idea, it isn't totally false. Yes, we've all been to a yoga class and we've felt our belly move. But you're not breathing into your belly, and you're certainly not singing from your diaphragm. So it's like a dome, right? I can do my best to sort of mimic, right? It's a dome, and when you inhale, and then when you exhale, it returns back to place. But your diaphragm is not where your belly button is. It's something that I see all the time. Those are your abdominal muscles. Now, those have more to do with exhalation, actually exhaling. If you blow out all your air, you'll feel your belly button starting to press in. Those are muscles of exhalation. But remember, my friends, do we sing on an inhale or an exhale? We sing on an exhale. So we can't really sing from our diaphragm if the diaphragm is the most important muscle of inhalation. So the next time someone tells you, sing from your diaphragm, I hope you'll understand that what we're really talking about is that the way you inhale will say a lot about how you're going to exhale. And that's a very, very, very important thing to remember. So I want you to think more, now that you know that the diaphragm actually kind of goes all the way around, I want you to put your hands on your ribs for me, my friends. And I want you to breathe in, and I want to feel your ribs go out to the side. Inhale. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Exhale. One more time with your hands on your back this time. Find your back. The ribs curl around to your lower back, or your middle back, excuse me. Inhale. Exhale. So you may have heard about don't breathe from your chest. Well, here's the thing. Your lungs are in your chest. Yes, we do want to make sure that we're finding a nice low breath, but your sternum does have to move to breathe. If your sternum didn't move, you wouldn't be able to breathe. You have to allow all aspects of the breathing to happen, but that doesn't happen by holding your folder in your hand and going, that's not how we're going to get the best breath in the world. The other reason I like to bust this myth is because diaphragmatic breathing is the only kind of breathing that there is. If you weren't breathing from your diaphragm, you wouldn't be breathing. The reason you breathe is because your diaphragm descends. So yes, it's very true that we can learn as singers to expand our breath, to expand our ribs, to expand our back, and feel that sensation of getting a slightly deeper breath. But you're not actually breathing into your belly. You can only breathe into your lungs, which are, as is the diaphragm, higher than we think. So I want you to pay attention, not to worrying about the diaphragm so much. I want you to pay attention more to that sensation of openness. If you open your throat, all of a sudden it inspires your ribs to open. If you open your throat, it all of a sudden inspires your back to open. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for an easy, open breath that reminds us that we don't think about breathing when we talk. So we don't necessarily have to go when we sing. It's something that I see a lot of the time. Now, there's also a gesture in choral conducting that's very unfair to singers. It's very unfair to choristers. You've all seen it, right? You've all seen the basic pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, when do we often breathe? On 4. The trouble is the gesture of 4 goes up. So it makes us go 1, 2, 3. Because that's what we see often, is we see a gesture going up, so does our body. So I want you to see if you can think 3, so that the up is almost like the ribs going out rather than your shoulders and your neck going with the hands. So you think 1, 2, 3, and then we sing. And it's an unfair gesture. I studied choral conducting for years, and I always thought, why is 4 up? That seems so counterintuitive to how we breathe, because really the diaphragm descends so that we inhale. It doesn't go up. So just keep that in mind. Think about how open you are, and don't try to sing from the diaphragm, because it's impossible. All right. So this is one that I talked about earlier. Lifting your soft palate. I put this as a sort of myth because you do have to lift your soft palate. I just think that choirs sometimes overemphasize what's actually happening when people attempt to lift their soft palate. I demonstrated earlier that you're already capable of lifting your soft palate. If you weren't capable of lifting your soft palate, you would talk like this. If you can make ah instead of or if you can make o instead of then you can already lift your soft palate. And so what happens is we get this idea in choir that we're trying to sing in tune. Have you ever done that thing, right? Oh, we're out of tune, we gotta sing higher. But look what that's doing to my neck. That's causing a lot of tension in my body. So I'm not actually lifting my soft palate anymore. I'm lifting all sorts of other things. So yes, we can lift our soft palate because you already do lift your soft palate. That's the best part. So rather than trying to, okay, I really have to do this thing, but in trying to lift my soft palate, I'm actually crunching my neck. And the example I always use, because it's almost the season, forgive me, it's a little early, but it's COVID, is I always use that Bing Crosby example that I talked about earlier. If you're singing the song White Christmas, you don't have to go, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. You don't have to do that to make a beautiful sound. You just have to choose a really pure ah. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. I'm not doing that to try to lift my soft palate. I'm choosing a vowel and the kind of resonance that I want. So the reason I say this is sort of a myth is because you do have to lift your soft palate. But the reason that it is a myth is because you already are. So the next time you're worried about lifting your soft palate, just make sure you're not singing with a nasal sound and you're already doing it, okay? All right, now, this next myth has a little bit of a test to it because I know you've been paying attention because you're very smart people. I know that for a fact. One that I often hear is breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower to lift your soft palate. Now, why is that a myth? You don't have to say it out loud, but I just want you to take 10 seconds and think about that. If you're breathing through your nose, can your soft palate be lifted? No. Because if you're breathing through your nose and your soft palate is lifted, you can't get air through your nose because the soft palate is there to block the back of your nose. So trying to lift your soft palate because you're breathing in through your nose doesn't make sense. It can't happen. So yes, the idea is we want to feel that sense of lift. I understand that idea, but that doesn't come from breathing through our nose because we wouldn't be able to breathe through our nose if our soft palate were lifted. To breathe through your nose, feel that sense. Breathe through your nose for me. It's very relaxing, but it doesn't lift your soft palate because it has to be open at the back. All right. Myth number 4. Vowels are easier to understand with lots of jaw and lip movement. Now, this is something that occurs from our earliest days singing in choir in school when we're little. You'll have the very enthusiastic teacher, right, in grade 4, grade 2, wherever you are, and they'll want to see you show those vowels. E, A, A, O, U. And we get this sense that we have to show the vowel on our face in order to be understood. But that's not actually how it works. I'm going to do that again, and then I'm going to do it without moving my mouth at all. So I can choose 5 really distinct vowels. E, A, O, U. Or I can do this. E, A, O. The lips and jaw are not required to make vowels. Vowels mostly happen with the tongue. Now, I don't know that I've ever fully mastered singing ooh without the tiniest rounding of my lips. There is going to be some response to what goes on the inside, but I want you to try it. I want you to say, you don't have to sing it. I just want you to, at home, say E, A, O, U. See if you can do as little with your mouth as possible on your own, at your own time, on your own pace. E, A, O, oo. You might notice on O and oo the lips move a little bit. That's totally fine. No exam, I said. Now, E, A, O, oo. Try that one. You see how much work that is? E, A, O, oo. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. My jaw only had to move to make the S. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Now, why is that important? Isn't it so much easier to get out of the way of the sound if our mouth isn't doing all of these things? All of a sudden, there's this consistency to the sound because we're not disturbing it so much by going, and all of a sudden, every vowel has a completely different sound quality to it. So this has to do with what kind of sound we want to have as a choir. Do we want the sound to be changing with every vowel, or do we want the vowels to be seamless and beautiful throughout? And a lot of that has to do with not over manipulating and over changing our vocal tract, because where do we resonate? Our vocal tract. So the more manipulation we do of the vocal tract, the more manipulation we do of the sound. And it's also just a lot easier to sing. You may have heard of people talking about jaw tension. Well, there's going to be a lot less jaw tension if you're not making every vowel happen with a massive movement of your vocal tract, and particularly of your jaw. That doesn't need to happen. E, A, O, oo. So I invite you to try that. I had a teacher, Dr. Robin Rice, and we would do these exercises where we would go, A, 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 I don't have to move anything to go from A to E, A, E, A, E. He would go, here's A, here's E, here's A, here's E. It was the tiniest little movement between A and E, and it's just with the tongue. So you don't have to show me the vowels on your face for me to know that you're making them, I promise. Okay. This one is very interesting to me. You may have heard people talk about the terms chest voice and head voice. I also categorize this myth as a sort of myth. I acknowledge the concepts of chest voice and head voice. What I like to debunk when it comes to this myth is that those are the only two options that we have. So we have this idea that chest voice is this that nice resonant chest tone speaking sound, and that head voice is just this really weak, breathy sound at the top of our voice. And that those are the only two options that we have, when in fact there's a myriad of voices available to us. When we talk about head voice, what I think people are referring to, or what I hope people are referring to, is that thing that we might call the choir boy soprano. You've heard the choir boys on the recording. That really head voicey sound. Well, what that actually is just falsetto. It's just really underdeveloped falsetto. So I can go, that's pure head voice. What if I go, that's not just that breathy tone anymore. Just because we're not in chest voice doesn't mean we have to be purely heady, breathy, and weak up there. And that's really when we start to get into that more operatic sound. Again, I'm not here to turn you into opera singers, but how they can sing that high and yet be that full of sound, that's what we're talking about. And of course, there's mixing of voices, there's chest, there's middle, there's whistle tone, that sort of dog whimper tone as well at the top of our voice. That's another option that we have. So there's all kinds of things. But if we only see the voice as chest voice and head voice, we don't have a lot of colors available to us. And I'll demonstrate this by just singing a scale. If I sing a scale, and I go all the way to the top in pure chest voice, you're going to notice that it starts to sound a little bit strained. I hope I warmed up. Let's see. So this is a pure chest voice scale. Do you hear how that kind of got a little heavy at the top? What would happen if I thought, I need to add a little bit of head voice? Yes, I'm going to be mostly in chest voice, but I'm going to add a little bit of head voice. On the opposite end of that, if I go down and I don't bring chest voice back in, I don't really have my low range anymore. So this idea that it's pure chest and pure head voice is absolutely a myth. So what I do is I start in head, or mixed, excuse me, and I bring a healthy amount of chest voice back into my voice. So if anyone ever tells you that there's only chest voice and head voice, now you know the secret, my friends. The last myth is posture. The reason I talk about this one is because the word posture is a very loaded word. And that you're all chorusers, you've all been there, you're holding your folder. I should have a choir folder with me, but I don't. And you hold your folder and you've been a little lazy at rehearsal and your conductor says posture and you go, now I want you to hear me. Can I talk very well right now? Probably not. It's a little bit difficult to communicate because I'm so tense because my idea of posture is being in the army. Right? See how my larynx, my Adam's apple isn't very low? That's because posture gives us this idea that the only way to stand in a choir is with this militant source of body function. What if instead you thought of the word structure? How's my structure? Okay. Oh, that feels better. Okay, so yeah, I'm standing upright, but I'm not doing that by holding my body in position. There's this wonderful, wonderful Canadian soprano and comedienne. Her name is Mary Lou Follis. She used to do a lot of shows on the CBC, these wonderfully funny sort of one-woman shows with Peter Tiefenbach. And she did this whole skit on singers and how they think they're supposed to stand, and she's imitating her voice teacher going, okay, your diaphragm is low, the back of your neck is long, and she goes all these things, and by the end of 5 minutes, the only sound she can make is because we have this idea that posture means we shouldn't be free. So I want to get rid of the word posture for a few years until we recalibrate that word in our brains to mean something more in line of structure, balance, ease, healthy tension, right? Because if we had no tension in our body, we'd be on the floor. There's tension in our muscles in order to hold us up, right? Can I breathe? Is posture actually serving me to breathe? Is posture serving me with enough space in my throat and ribs to breathe and then make a sound? Excuse me. Am I actually free to make sound because of my posture? So that's another big myth for me as well. Now, I want to just quickly move on because we're almost running out of time here, but there's this thing that we call in my world voice hygiene. Now, if you're thinking, Dr. Mark, are you saying my breath stinks? No, I'm not. I can't smell your breath right now. You're fine. Don't worry. Your oral hygiene is great. What I mean by voice hygiene is how we take care of our voice before we even use it. Well, before and after we even use it. So voice hygiene actually has to do with the practices in our lives that set us up well to use our voice well. So some of them are very clear. In fact, I should follow number 1 and do some hydration here. It has to do with, am I drinking enough water? Have you ever tried to sing when you haven't had enough water? It doesn't feel very good, right? So the idea is that if we're properly hydrating, our voice is already going to be ready to go. And sometimes if you're sick and you feel really dry, that doesn't feel good either. And you're constantly steaming in the shower and you're doing anything that you can to get some hydration back to your voice. Well, if you decide to make water a part of your daily practice, and perhaps think about limiting caffeine. I know we're all coffee addicts for the most part when we wake up in the morning, but think about keeping your voice healthy in the first place, essentially. That also speaks to what we eat and the substances that we put in our body. As you may know, alcohol is very, very drying for our throat. So you consider how much alcohol you drink before a concert. Maybe you have a nice healthy dinner before the concert, and then you wait to celebrate with a beer or a glass of wine after the show, so that you're never drying things out before you even get there. Because if the voice is already dry before we use it, and then we sing a concert for 2 hours, we are making sound with very dry vocal cords, and that's not something that we want to do. That could lead to issues down the road. There are certain foods that you want to think about not eating right before a concert. So if you're making yourself things filled with onions, tomatoes, acids, things like that, you're going to be burping a lot while you sing during the concert, and you're going to start to feel that sense of reflux while you're singing. Not only is that uncomfortable while you're singing, that's actually irritating your vocal folds, and it's only going to make you want to drink water more. So a lot of the choices that we make in our food are going to affect the ability for our vocal folds to vibrate properly. And when we feel like our voice is working, we relax so much more when we sing. A lot of tension that we use in our voice is actually created by external factors, like a lack of hydration, like what we eat, like the drying effects of caffeine and alcohol and other substances. So this is setting yourself up to have the most easy and carefree time when you're singing from the get-go. And if you'd like to know more, if you'd like the full complete list of things that you should and shouldn't eat before you sing, you can let me know and I'm happy to pass that on to you. Again, I don't want you to worry too much about this stuff, but these are things that I want you to consider. What am I putting into my body so that I'm not causing any unnecessary issues and that I'm taking care of myself before I sing? Sleep, of course. Get lots of sleep, especially the night before a concert. Make sure you're well rested. Have you ever noticed that when you wake up, your voice is a little lower than it was the night before? There's something about when we wake up, all of a sudden we have this nice deep voiceover voice when we wake up. That's because we just slept all night, so our body relaxed, and that allowed our neck muscles to relax. So our larynx is actually going to be a little bit lower and a little bit more relaxed. And of course, we haven't been using the cords as much, so that they've recovered, so we can have a nice richer tone as well in the morning. So the better rested we are, the better we're going to be able to sing. Next thing is basic voice use. We want to make sure that we're thinking about how we use our voice on a daily basis, so that we're taking care of it in a way that reminds us how to sing. Because often, if we speak well, we will sing well, and vice versa. So if you have a concert tonight and you go to a really, really loud football game during the day, that might not be the best choice for you, because you need to think about how much yelling, how much screaming, how much cheering you're going to be doing. If there's lots of people there, you're going to be talking really loudly, which is going to be using up a lot of your vocal stamina for the day. Because the nice thing is the vocal cords can, of course, recover, but we only have so much stamina. Like any muscle, it does need some time off. So think about how often not only are you talking, but how much are you just using your energy for the day? If you've done a massive marathon, your body's going to be fried before you have to sing. Now, not too many of us do marathons, but I want you to consider, what have I done throughout the day, and how could that affect my voice in the evening, so that there's no concern here. It's just not feeling good, because that's not a feeling that allows us to be set up to sing beautifully when the concert comes, or even when rehearsal comes every Tuesday night, like it does tonight. Thank you for having me steal your rehearsal tonight. I appreciate it. And basically, the difference between misuse and abuse is essentially things that are just really bad for your voice. Yelling, screaming, scratching your throat, things like that. Misuse is more about things that aren't terrible for your voice, but when you do it over and over and over again, then it becomes an issue, right? So for example, if you're at the gym, you lift weights, no problem. You're supposed to put your muscles under tension for them to grow. But if you lift weights for 8 hours, your muscles are going to stop. They're going to fatigue and you can't do anything anymore. So even the best use of your voice, if you do it for 5 hours, you have nothing left. So there are certain practices that are just bad for your voice, and then there are practices that are bad for your voice in excess. So think about, what do I do for a living? Do I talk all day for a living? A lot of people do. Teachers, preachers, radio people, or anyone who does presentations or training. There are a lot of people who are professional voice users, but they don't think of it because they're not an opera singer or they're not an actor. Well, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean you aren't a professional voice user. So you start to think, how am I using my speaking voice throughout the day? And how is that setting me up for my concert tonight? Speaking of that, I want to bring to your attention 2 practices that we all have that I just want you to reconsider in your brain. Throat clearing and something that we call vocal fry. I'll talk about vocal fry in a second. And this is where I want to remind you of the shame-free zone. It's okay if you clear your throat. I'm not here to tell you you're terrible for clearing your throat. We all do it. But throat clearing is something that if we do to excess, does become bad for our voices. So I want you to see as much as possible over the next few days, without judgment or shame. The next time you clear your throat, I want you to see if you can choose instead to swallow or to take a glass of water. And maybe you did it once. Maybe tomorrow you'll do it once. Great. One time you chose to swallow or drink water instead of clear your throat. Awesome. Maybe the next day you'll do it 2 times. Maybe the next day you'll do it 3 times. It's about building a habit where you allow yourself to be able to sing for as long as possible throughout your whole lifespan, because that's the beautiful thing about singing, is we can sing for our whole lives if we take care of our voices. And that's ultimately why I'm here. The more you know these things, the better equipped you'll be to take care of your voice for the rest of your life, so you'll be able to sing for the rest of your life. So I just invite you to notice. This is the yoga teacher in me coming out. We always talk about noticing. Oh, okay, I cleared my throat. All right, next time I'm going to try a swallow, or I'm going to take a sip of water, or I'm just going to do nothing. I'm just going to see if that sensation, oh, okay, it cleared. Sometimes we don't actually have to clear our throat. Sometimes we just do it because we do it. Now, the other one that you'll see there is called vocal fry. What is vocal fry? Have you ever heard people at the end of their sentences, when they finish a sentence, they go, oh, it's like that. There isn't actually voice the entire time that they're talking. All of a sudden, at the end of the sentence, it kind of goes off like this. We're all guilty of it. Again, this is something that I want you to start to notice. I want you to notice if when you speak, everything you say, hello, my name is Mark, instead of hello, my name is Mark, we all sort of fall off. Now, this is getting back to when we were in elementary school and we were learning about speech delivery and how not to drop off at the end of sentences. That's not just a volume thing. That's also actually a vocalism thing. And there's some very, very interesting things that we're looking into in the voice world with vocal fry. There are certain fields where people feel that they have to sort of make their voices sound more masculine, right? And so they do this thing where they put a lot of pressure on their larynx. And there's a pressure societally for men to sound very masculine, and that can actually put a lot of damage on the voice if done to excess. So there's some really interesting research opportunities for vocal fry. And again, vocal fry in and of itself isn't a worry. It's when you're using that vocal fry a lot. So I want you to go back to some of our earlier slides, and I want you to remember what the chords look like when they're closed and when they're actually vibrating, and think, ah, 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 and take that into your speaking. Hello, hello, my name is Mark, so that everything you say has voice, and you're going to feel so much better, and you're going to have a lot more stamina than you think you do with your voice. And then the last one are some things to consider about pharmacology. For example, I really, really, really strongly encourage you if you have a headache before a concert, and that happens to the best of us, if you ever have a headache before a concert, please choose acetaminophen, not ibuprofen, and not aspirin. Ibuprofen and aspirin cause your blood to thin a little bit, so it actually increases blood flow. When there's more blood flow than normal and you're singing, you can think that you've got more power than you actually do, and you can actually end up doing damage to your voice. And there have been some stories of famous singers who took an ibuprofen or an aspirin before a big arena concert, and all of a sudden something happened to their voice because of that. I want you to consider things in the spring and fall about the allergy medication that you take. So antihistamines exist to dry out mucus. That's what they're there to do. The thing about the vocal cords, and actually other parts of our body, is parts of our body are lined with mucus because they're supposed to be. So there's actually a mucosal lining over the vocal folds. And that's what keeps them soft. That's what keeps them pliable and nice and vibratory, is because of that mucus. The thing is when you take antihistamines, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't just get the mucus in your nose. It gets the mucus everywhere. And all of a sudden, you have completely dry vocal folds. If you then go sing a 2-hour concert, that can start to create some damage. Again, it has to be long-term, but it's something that you need to consider. If there's a way, and I know some allergies are terrible, and so this can feel like a total catch-22 because some people's allergies are really, really bad. It's just something to consider about some of the pharmacological decisions that we make in terms of caring for our voice. It's just like alcohol, right? It's the same thing, it dries out the voice. So these are just some tips and tricks for your toolbox to consider when taking care of your voice, and just maybe learning some of the things that you didn't realize, like onions and tomatoes and other things like that, that can really cause some reflux and irritate the cords right before you sing. So I just have a couple of final thoughts here. This is one of my favorite quotes ever that I'll just read to you here. Quand tu veux construire un bateau, ne commence pas par rassembler du bois, couper des planches et distribuer du travail, mais rêver au sein des hommes le désir de la mer grand et large. Now, if you need a quick translation, basically it says, if you want to build a boat, don't just start by gathering wood, cutting your planks, and delegating work. Instead, awaken in the heart of the people you're with the desire to go out to sea. So we need to have a purpose in what we're doing. So the purpose to sing is to enjoy it, right? I hope. Because if we're not having fun, let's go do something else, right? We need to enjoy what we're doing. And so all of these things that I've shared with you today are not to scare you. They're not to make you think that you're taking terrible care of your voice. These are things to empower you so that you can sing because you love it. It's this beautiful thing where when we do both, we can sing forever. We can sing for the rest of our lives because we're taking care of something that we love. Because when we love something, when we're grateful for it, we take care of it. And I want you to be able to take care of your voice in a way where you still want to go out to sea. That's the reason to build the boat. You still want to go to choir rehearsal because you love what you're doing. And because you feel like you can. You feel like your voice is always at its best. Because as you'll read there, yes, you are a voice user too. You don't have to be a famous opera singer for me to think that you're worthy of having a beautiful voice that's taken care of. You can also take care of your voice, and you deserve that. So make sure that whatever you take from this serves the whole self, right? We talked earlier about the disembodied voice, sort of just seeing it as this. Well, as we know, how we feel affects the sound of our voice, and it affects how we're going to communicate with people. And so if you're feeling better, you're going to sing better. So I hope that you will not be discouraged by these tips, but actually encouraged to implement them into your life and show up to rehearsal with your best voice. Because as I mentioned in the sort of promotion of this chat tonight, one of my favorite quotes by soprano Leontine Price is, "The youngest you can ever be is when you sing and enjoy it." So if we're having fun, the rest is just gravy. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. We have a couple of questions that have come in on the chat. One was submitted to me and I was asked to relay it. What makes a vibrato, the vocal folds vibrating? Why do some people have vibrato and others don't?
Thank you for that question. So vibrato is something that is often overly worried about. And what I mean by that is people often associate vibrato with being good or bad, right? Oh man, they've got a great vibrato. I don't have that. I'm not a good singer. Well, here's the thing. There's lots of great singers who have too much vibrato, and there's lots of great singers who have no vibrato. There's all kinds of larynges. By the way, that's the plural of larynx. I just learned that recently, actually. There's lots of different larynges, and there's lots of different kinds of voices. Now, what is vibrato? Vibrato is simply a natural vibration that occurs from something like vocal folds that have a vibratory pattern to them. So if you consider tension versus strain, right? You need tension to make sound. If there were no tension, I wouldn't be able to make a lot of sound, right? The chords do have to come together. If the chords come together and I exhale and I allow my air to be free, there will naturally be a slight vibration to it. Now that is different than I see you all laughing. One is natural, one is put on. One is because we think we're supposed to have that. Now, we've done some really interesting, I used to be part of a voice laboratory where I was doing my doctorate. And we did some really fun studies on your giggle. We measured the speed of someone's giggle, and then we measured the speed of their vibrato, and they were identical. It was the coolest thing. And we used a colleague of mine who has the most joyful giggle I've ever heard. You can't not smile when you hear it. It's the greatest thing ever. And then she sang, sure enough, it was the exact same. The per second vibration of the notes, because there is a slight pitch change up and down and around the note. It's very, very minimal. That's why vibrato is actually really good for tuning, because it actually doesn't require that same right? That's when we start to do that thing. We're like, oh, we're falling out of tune. We're falling out of tune. If you just exhale, you'll stay in tune a lot better. Right? You just can keep going and going. So if you stop exhaling, my friends, what happens to the chords? They stop vibrating. So often a lack of vibrato or too much vibrato are actually a lack of airflow. Because one way the too much vibrato is because there's no air and I'm just shaking my larynx. Oh. The other side of that is there's no vibrato because there's no air. Do you hear when I added air to the sound? Right? Because if I don't exhale when I sing, I've got no chance. And so often that thing that I was saying earlier that choirs do, where they think that tuning is this, they have to do this to tune, that's because there's no airflow. So the only way that we think we have to change the pitch is to keep it in that place. What if you just allow the air to be so constant that the pitch has no choice but to be right in the center? Did you hear when I stopped breathing? When I stopped exhaling, all of a sudden, and you heard the pitch just do this. But I can't correct pitch because remember, sound doesn't happen up here. Sound happens here. So doing this has absolutely nothing to do with tuning at all. So it's a long answer because vibrato is a very mysterious thing that people worry too much about. The last thing I'll say about it is we also did another experiment where we had people hold a laser pointer. If you hold a laser pointer to the wall, have you ever noticed how very few people are perfectly still when they hold something? You ever notice how everybody has a slight shake or whatever you want to call it, a slight tremor to them, that also can have a lot to do with your vibrato. If you have naturally have more tremor to you, you might naturally have more vibrato. And so my assertion is that I guarantee you surgeons who do really fine surgery, I bet you they're dead center. I bet you they're nice and steady, right? And they might naturally not have as much vibrato. The problem is that we too often take Brahms and Mahler or whoever it is, we take this romantic music and we try to sing it like Baroque music. Why are we singing romantic music like early music? Isn't it true that we use different instrumentation for Mahler than we do for Bach? If we use an orchestra differently for Bach and Mahler, why do we use the voice the same for all of our repertoire? Why is this idea that, oh, vibrato gets in the way of pitch? Well, hold on. I've heard lots of opera singers with vibrato sing well in tune. So for me, it has to do with not thinking that vibrato is good or bad. It's about why do we care? What's the point? What is it actually serving us? If vibrato is an indication that we need to exhale more, I'm all for it. If it's an indication that you're not a good singer because you don't have enough of it, I'm not interested, because that's not the point. So I always have a lot to say about this. So thank you for that question. It's a long answer, but just if you're free flowing air and you have vibrato, cool. If you've got free flowing air and you don't have a lot of it, then you're perfect for Monteverdi and Bach. Awesome. And that's okay.
Thank you, Mark. I see we've got several more questions that have come in on the chat. I don't think we're going to have time for them all, but would you like me to read them to you, or can you see the chat?
I can see them.
Okay.
All right. What causes the breathy sound often associated with low notes in choir basses, and how do you remedy it? The quick answer is often it has to do with what we perceive low notes are supposed to sound like, because often what we think we're going to sound like is what we will sound like. So it is that slightly exaggerated version of what I call Bing Crosby that causes a lot of basses to think that to be a bass, they have to sound like this. Because basses, this is how we sound, right? This is our voice, because we're men and we're basses, and this is what we must sound like. If I am a bass baritone, which I am, do you hear how there's color to my voice? Do you hear how I sound like a baritone? I don't have to go like this in order to sound like a baritone. And that's how we end up singing, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. And we put this idea of sound. So basses, I'm gonna throw something out at you. If you're a bass, you already sound like a bass. You don't have to have this idea that I'm supposed to sound this way. And it's about clearing up the tone. Inhale, ah, 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 and I always use a spectrum. So I want everybody to do this for me, because I can see you all now. I want you to put your fingers together like this, and these are your vocal folds, okay? So they close and they open. And you're gonna do this for me. You're gonna make a really breathy sound. It's gonna sound like this. Ah, ah. Right, good. I didn't hear any of you, but I heard you do it. I did. So you chose to make a breathy sound. Now we're going to go to the other side of the spectrum. Ready? We're going to do a really, really harsh sound. Ah, ah, ah. Not fun, right? So from breathy to harsh. Now we're going to meet right in the middle. We're going to do a little bit of breathy and we're going to do a little bit of harsh. Ah, ah. Let's remember breathy. Ah. Let's remember harsh. Ah, ah. We're good at that one, right? Middle. Ah, ah. Now that's something that any singer, no matter how famous or not famous, can use. If you're too breathy, go the other way. If you're too harsh, go the other way, and then meet in the middle. Life is a spectrum in every kind of way. No one singer is on either end or right in the middle of the spectrum. Do we love Diana Krall because she has a harsh sound? No, we love Diana Krall because she has a breathy sound. That's called jazz, right? We love opera because it has a clear tone. We like some forms of pop music because it has a slightly harsher sound. There's all kinds of ways we can use our voice. And I don't sing Bing Crosby the way that I sing Verdi. That would be kind of boring. All right. Question. Oh, I think I have to go back up. Sorry. Do you have additional care tips for the teachers, presenters, trainers, phone service center workers, carrying and balancing when your job is talking constantly? So there's only so much that we can do when we have to talk all the time. That's just, it's going to be the nature of it. One of the things that you can do is you can actually implement exactly what I just said into your speaking voice. Because remember, I don't just work with singers, I work with people who speak too. Do you tend to speak with a slightly harsh tone? Or are maybe you a little bit shyer and you're putting a lot of air through your voice when you talk? Well, what happens when you use a lot of air, is that you're drying out your cords, because the more air that passes through, the more dry your cords get. So you can start to say, hello, hi. Maybe you're using a lot of vocal fry when you talk too. Hi, how's it going? You all right? Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, that thing we all do. I know it doesn't sound very good. It sounds almost demonic coming from me, but think about the way you use your voice, and that's going to help so much. And then stay hydrated. I don't think enough people who work those kinds of jobs have water with them all the time. I think they just sort of drink water at lunch, maybe on break. Your students will wait for you for 5 seconds. I see a bunch of you drinking water. Very good. They'll wait 5 seconds for you. Make sure you're getting lots of sleep. And then also, you can warm up your voice too. Warm-ups are not just for choir. Warm-ups are also for speaking. Maybe it's in the shower. Maybe it's some just getting your voice into that yummy, yummy place before you get going for work.
Mark?
All right. Do we sing better if we breathe through the nose rather than
Mark,
the mouth?
I think we're running a bit low on time.
Okay.
Marg, our director, just wanted to say something.
Yeah, Mark, I just wondered if there's some great questions here. And I wondered if it was possible that those people could send you a question via email. Is that fair? We're running out of time. Why don't you answer something else? One more.
Okay.
And then we could be here all night for sure, because you've got so much to tell us. We'll maybe just answer one more that you choose.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if you're willing, would you be willing to put your email address in the chat as well for further questions?
Yes, I would.
Here you go.
Okay. Do we sing better if we breathe through the nose than the mouth? Nope. Let's see. What should... Okay, cold, sore throat. Yeah, that's a good one for a lot of people, especially with winter coming up. Have you all heard of a neti pot? There's also a version called the squeeze bottle. The neti pot's very weird because you kind of have to do this. It's a sinus rinse for your sinuses. My friends, I can see you judging me. I know, but here's the thing. It seems weird. I know it seems weird, but it's so helpful because what it is it doesn't have any, it doesn't have any drugs in it. It feels so strange at first, but it's the greatest way to clear out your sinuses without taking any substances. It's the best way to do it. So it's called Neilmed. I'll put that in the chat here. That's what it's called. That's the brand. There's a squeeze bottle and there's also an neti pot. That's my go-to. From there, lemon is actually drying for the voice. Lemon actually dries the voice out. So stick to teas that don't have honey. There's another one called Throat Coat Tea by Traditional Medicinals. It has not a substance, but it has an herb in it called slippery elm, which is really, really nice for the voice. Lots of showering, lots of steaming, lots of rest, and just do your best.
Wow. Mark, I wish we could listen to you for another hour.
Okay.
As you can see, it was a very, very popular subject. Let's all There you go, all of us, and more people also on our YouTube channel.
Thank
So
you, everyone.
maybe about 120 people. So you all now know Mark if you didn't know him before, and he is in town, and he is awesome as a teacher, as a performer, etc. So thank you very much, Mark. That was awesome.
My pleasure.
We'll stay in touch for sure for something else that we can do in the next few months. For those of you who are guests, thank you so much for being here. There were people from all kinds of choirs, community choirs. There, I know some friends from Vancouver were in here, somebody from Montreal that I know. This is information if you are interested in supporting our choir to help us out. That in a year that's like yours, like if you're your own choir as well, a season like no other, but we are continuing to connect and meet every Tuesday. So here is the information. You're welcome. Thank you for visiting. So for those of you in Centennial,